First tool that we're going to talk about today is the round nose pliers. You're going to be using these anytime you're making a circular turn with wire. If you take a look, the tip of the tool, completely circular all the way around. The very tips are really small and fine, and when you're buying, you want to make sure you get some really good fine tips. The base of the tool is pretty thick. You want to make sure that you have a good range. You have a nice thin part and a nice thick part as well. You want to use these only when making circular turns with wire. Any other time you use them, you're really just going to wear them out. They're inexpensive pliers. You shouldn't be spending more than $10 on them. So if you have to buy a new pair, it's okay. It happens. Just take a look when you're picking up your pliers which ones you're picking up. For any other kind of wire manipulation, you're going to be using flat nose or chain nose. This is an example of chain nose pliers. Now, as you can see, they're flat on the inside. They've got a nice curved edge, and they're pretty small at the tip. You want to make sure when you're buying them that they're nice and flat on the inside. You can buy them with what's called teeth, and that's sort of a jagged inside. It's really nice to grip with wire, but what happens is when you grip with that wire, you're going to make marks all over your wire, and you really don't want that. So make sure you get a flat or smooth inside. Now, there's also the option of a flat nose plier. If you sort of take a look, they look pretty similar, but the difference is in the tip. The flat nose plier just has sort of a rectangular top instead of coming to a point. It doesn't really make a difference which ones you have. They're both going to do the same thing. I actually have both and I use both, but you don't have to get both. If you're going to get one, I would recommend getting the chain nose plier as opposed to the flat nose plier. If you take a look at these, you probably saw this nice little red mark right here. Now, the reason that is because when I'm working with a lot of students, we usually have our tools all laid out on the table. Most of them look exactly the same. So this is sort of the way I distinguish my tools from other people. I have a nice little nail polish mark right here, just in red nail polish. I tell my students to do something similar, and everybody has a different color, so everybody knows whose plier is who. The next ones are your cutters. And all cutters are going to look a little bit different. This is one example of a cutter. As long as it'll cut wire, it'll work just fine. These are nice because they have this nice flush edge and I can get in really close, especially with that tip right there. You only want to use these for cutting regular wire. Make sure you don't cut cord with them, you don't cut memory wire. The only thing you're going to be cut sterling silver, nickel silver, base metal, things like that. Really helpful, and they cut really nicely. The next tool is the crimping tool. You're going to be using this tool to squash crimps when securing on cable cord type chain when you're stringing a bracelet or a necklace. If you take a real close look at these tools, you will see when the two tips come together, you'll see there's two different holes. There's one towards the front and one towards the back. The one towards the front is a nice circular hole. The one towards the back is more of a kidney bean shape. This is really important to take a look at the distinction between the two, and it will help you later on when actually doing the process. The next item I want to show you is called a head pin. And basically what you're going to use this for is you're going to be using this to make any kind of pendant, earring, things like that. It's basically just a long piece of wire with a little bit of a stopper on the end. So when you put your beads on, they don't slide right off. When you're buying head pins, they come in different thicknesses. You can get a thin, a medium, a thick. You want to probably start off with a medium. It's going to be your best bet. Most beads will fit on a medium. Sometimes if you're using pearls, glass beads, things like that, you're going to probably want to buy a thin because the bead might not quite fit on the medium head pin. The next thing I want to talk about is an ear wire. And basically an ear wire is the part of the metal that actually goes through your ear. There's all different kinds of ear wires you can buy. Every different material, stainless steel, base metal, sterling gold, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. When you're buying them, make sure you buy something that reflects what you want to wear. If your earring is really simple, you may want to get a fancy ear wire. If your earring is really complicated, you've got a lot going on, try sticking with a simple ear wire. This is a basic ear wire that I'm showing right here. It's sterling silver. This loop right here on the bottom is what's going to attach to your head pin. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is clasps. When you're looking to buy a clasp, there's so many different options. Toggle, hook and eye, S-clasp, so many different choices. Some of them are fancy, some of them are basic. When you're looking to buy a clasp for a specific bracelet or necklace, pick whichever one you like the best. I recommend when getting a clasp for a bracelet, you probably want to stick to a toggle. A toggle because it's really easy to put on yourself, so you don't need assistance when putting on a bracelet. The kind that I usually use is usually an S-clasp. I like a little bit of a fancier one as opposed to a basic one. You'll see later on the clasps that I use. This is just a nice example of all different types of clasps. When you go to a bead store, you'll find there's a lot more than I can just show here. So pick the one that reflects your work the best. The next item is metal. When you're starting off with this video, I want you guys to go get some really basic metal to work with. I use a nickel silver. It's actually got no silver in it, it's just sort of a nickel alloy, and it's called silver because of the color. It's a really great metal to work with. It's practice wire, you don't have to worry about wasting, it's very cheap. So this is what I'll be using for any type of wire work we're doing in this video. Another option is sterling silver. Make sure you get your practice down and you know what you're doing before you move on to sterling silver. It's not that it's that expensive, it's that you just don't want to waste it so much. Sterling silver is made up of 92.5% pure silver and 7.5% copper. The copper's in there for strength. If you were working with just fine silver, it would be really soft, really malleable, and you would just end up breaking it. Sterling silver is a really nice material to work with. You can also get plated silver. It's basically brass or copper with a sterling silver coating. It's basically just a really thin layer, so make sure that when you're working with it, you don't do too much manipulation because sometimes that layer can flake off. When working with metal, the thickness of the metal is really important. The thickness of actual wire is called the gauge. This right here, for example, is a 20 gauge wire. My practice wire that I'm going to be doing a lot of work with is a 22. The higher the number, the thinner the wire. 22 is a nice, good, average thickness. It's really great to work with rosary turns, but if you want something a little bit more delicate than what we're doing today, you can go up to a 24 or a 26. It'll make your work just a lot nicer, smaller. Just remember to take into account when you're measuring, the thickness is going to be a little bit different. So if you practice with 22 and then you move to 26, your measurements are going to be a little bit off. So practice a little bit first with the thinner wire and then move on to sterling or gold. The last thing you want to know about buying wire is that when you buy it at a certain consistency. And basically what that means is that it's heat treated to have a certain elasticity to it. The wire I buy most of the time is called dead soft. It's really, really soft and easy to work with. You can buy it anywhere from dead soft, soft, half hard to hard. Hard wire is just really tough. It's hard to move. If you try doing rosary turns in hard wire, forget it. You'll be so frustrated instantaneously. So when you do rosary turns, make sure you use a soft or a dead soft wire. This wire is dead soft that I'm going to be working with today, so make sure that the wire you get is really soft. If you're buying copper, it's always really soft. You can't really get it in a harder wire. When buying sterling silver or gold wire, you'll have that softness option. Dead soft all the way up to hard. Think about what you're doing before you buy. If you're making clasps, you want to use a harder wire so that the stiffness sort of stays in there. If you're making rosary turns, you really want to buy a soft wire. Make sure you stick to soft or dead soft. The type of cord we're going to be working with today is a cable cord. The thickness is 21 strands, and what that means is that on the inside of this thin little cord there are 21 strands of stainless steel wire woven together with a plastic or nylon coating. When you're buying this wire, it usually comes in all sorts of different brands. There's not one that's better than the other, really. It's all pretty much the same thing. Just make sure that when you're buying the right thickness. 21 strands is right about at a medium. A fine is something close to 7 or 9, and a thicker cord would be probably a 49. If you're using really heavy beads and you want to make something really chunky, this is the perfect cord to use. But just make sure that you're getting the right thickness. The bigger the beads, the thicker the cord you want. Just make sure that the thickness of the cord isn't bigger than the bead hole, so you want your beads to slide on pretty easily. The last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is two different types of glue that you can be using. One is a basic super glue. You can get any kind of glue you want. The super glue you want to use is just a really liquid glue. Now, you can use any kind of glue at the supermarket, that's completely fine. Just make sure that it's got a fast drying time, and when you're working with it, don't get it on your fingers. You want to use the super glue whenever you're working with any type of cord, something that can soak up a liquid. This glue is really nice if you're making knots, things like that. It gets inside the knot, it soaks it up, and then it hardens from the inside, which makes a really, really secure knot. If you're only working with metal, you want to use a two-part epoxy. It doesn't always look like this in this type of a tube. Sometimes it can come in two separate containers, and basically what you want to do is you want to mix equal parts of both. One is a hardener and one is the resin. When you mix them together, it creates a really nice thick glue. You want to use this glue in any type of connection where you're doing metal to metal, metal to stone. It's a thicker glue. It can sometimes fill in gaps or holes, and it dries fast. Make sure when you're buying it, you buy 5-minute epoxy. You don't want to wait 24 hours. And make sure it's clear, because sometimes a lot of different epoxies can come in different colors. And when you're buying, you always want to buy clear.